Hey, thanks for joining me. So, in kind of restarting this channel after being away for several months, one of the things I wanted to do was to introduce more videos about tools instead of just knives. Because actually the original name of this channel was The Workbench Knife and Tool, and somehow it's become almost all knives and no tools. So I want to kind of reverse that a little bit. I have a really broad range of experience using tools. And I'm not really just talking about like automotive tools or carpentry tools, but in my work life I've done low voltage electrical work. I've repaired typewriters for a living. I've repaired cameras for a living. Worked on all kinds of other business machines and computers and electronics. So I have a pretty broad range of experience with tools, and so what I want to do today is go over the tools that I use for typewriter repair. Now, there's kind of a funny story to this. When I was in high school and I took typing, there was this little old guy that would come in and he had this wrinkled gray suit and he just looked so sad, and he would come into the typing class and he would fix the typewriters, and I remember looking at him and going, man, I would hate to have that job. That just looks so sad, so miserable. Little did I know, a couple years after high school was out, I would find myself working at a business machine dealership in Norman, Oklahoma, Southwest Typewriter, and I would be in the Moore school system in a much nicer suit, I must say, repairing typewriters. And I was in my early 20s, and so some of these high school kids are just barely younger than I am. So I wasn't an old man doing that then, but it just kind of points out how much of a sense of humor God has. I looked at that little guy and was like, man, I would hate to have that job. And then 2 years later, there I was, or actually about 4 years later, there I was doing the same thing. But anyway, I did typewriter repair for about 14 years. And with the kind of resurrection of manual typewriters as a popular thing, I kind of dug out a bunch of my typewriter tools, which I never throw tools away. And there is one tool that I wish I somehow have misplaced. I don't know what happened to it, but it's not one I use that much. So anyway, I got a whole bag full of tools here. I used to have my tools in looked like a big briefcase that looked like it was leather covered. It was actually vinyl, and it had these pallets in the bottom and the top that held all the tools, and then below the bottom pallet I had rags and cleaning fluids and all kinds of stuff like that. So my digital voltmeter, because I worked on not only typewriters, I worked on calculators, and also worked on electronic calculators, and worked on photocopiers a little later on too, which is another story altogether. Anyway, we're going to go through, this is just actually an Army surplus tool bag that I've kind of thrown all my typewriter tools in. I'm going to go over all the tools that I use, especially the ones that are kind of specialty tools or a little hard to find. And so if you're trying to get into typewriter repair, or if you're just as a hobbyist, you're collecting some typewriters but you want to be able to fix them yourself, you're pretty handy with tools, there's some tools that you need that will definitely make your life easier if you're trying to do that. So anyway, let's dig in. We'll start looking at some typewriter tools. Okay, let's get started. So one of the first tools you're going to need are some good screwdrivers. Now, good screwdrivers are really essential, and you're primarily going to be using flat blade screwdrivers of these older typewriters, and you want to make sure you have something that's pretty high quality. Now, the screwdrivers that I used to use when I was doing this for a living were made by a company called X-Lite. And X-Lite screwdrivers are really well-made screwdrivers, but they have become kind of exorbitantly expensive. There's still some specialty places you can get them, and I still have some of them, but not all the ones I used to use. This little 4-inch 3/16, it's 3/16 wide and 4-inch long, was a pretty handy screwdriver. And but the screwdriver that I used the most was a 6-inch 3/16 tip, so it's 3/16 wide, 6-inch long blade. And these made by X-Lite are really nice. They've got the rubber grip over the handle, which is nice. I guess if you didn't really like it, you could actually maybe remove that. But they are just an excellent quality screwdriver. The blades tips are the right thickness, and they work really well. But a 6-inch 3/16 flat blade screwdriver is going to be a screwdriver you pick up just about every time you work on a typewriter. At least I did. The other one that I use a lot, and this is actually not an X-Lite, it's another brand, but Blackhawk. But I got this actually out of at a tool store that sells a lot of automotive tools. But this is an 1/8 inch by 4 inch flat blade screwdriver. And this is another one that I use quite a bit. It actually fits a lot of the smaller screws in most typewriters. These two screwdrivers, the 6 inch and the 4 inch, 3/16, 1/8 inch, I mean, these I made my living with. If I could only have two screwdrivers, those would be the two for typewriter repair. So those were really essential screwdrivers to have. Now, there are some other tools related to starting screws that are really helpful. And the thing that I wish I could find is these, and I don't know if anyone makes them like this anymore. So this is a screw starter. See if I can get this to focus kind of up close here. A screw starter is got these spring-loaded blades, and you push it, you put it in the slot of a screw, and then you push the handle down, and it spreads the tips apart. You can see that they're spread apart. And it actually, these are spring-loaded, so it holds the screw. So you can put a screw on here, and then you can stick it down in the typewriter, and you can get it started. Now, it's not for tightening screws. It's just for starting them. And these come in various sizes. I have a smaller one and this one, and these are really indispensable. I looked and looked in different places to see if I could find a similar kind of screw starter, and was not able to find one. Now, fortunately, most screwdrivers in a typewriter are steel. There are some brass ones, but most are steel, and if you magnetize, they make little magnetizers, or you can just use a good strong magnet, magnetize your screwdriver tips. That works pretty well. But yeah, these screw starters, back when I used to work on typewriters, there was a company in Dallas, Texas called Ames Supply, and Ames had all these really cool specialty tools. And there's a button on the back here you can press to release it, and then when you push the when you push the tip in, it spreads those apart. Anyway, I have a couple of these, two different sizes, and those are just really hard to beat for putting in screws. The next thing are wrenches. Now, the wrenches you use are typically known as ignition wrenches, and mine are just kind of jumbled up in a bag here now. But they're talking about wrenches that, and I have in both metric and in US sizes, and the ones I use most are frankly open-end wrenches. Combination wrenches would be nice too. I'm going to put a link in the description down below for these tools, and including those screwdrivers and some of these wrenches. I found a set of wrenches you can get really affordable. They're good high carbon steel, and they're combination wrenches, so they've got the box end wrench on one end and the open end on the other, and a full set both metric and US or SAE. And so ignition wrenches in these small sizes, I mean, some of these wrenches are pretty tiny, and you'll find some places where you have to loosen a lock nut to turn a screw that goes through the middle of it to make an adjustment or something like that, and having these small wrenches is really essential. Anyway, like I say, I'll put a link in the description down below for some I found online that look to be a really good set. Okay, next thing I want to talk about are pliers. Now, these are duckbill pliers, and I didn't even know they existed until I started working on typewriters. And now that I know that these exist, I use them all the time for all kinds of things. They are just so handy. So they have some serrations here at the tip. Some of them are fully serrated. These particular ones are serrated here and then smooth. These were made by Crescent. I think the Crescent brand is now part of Channel Lock, I think. I'm going to link a couple of these I found. I found some from a company called Nipex, which makes some really good high quality tools. They're German, I believe. And then another one, they're called Williams, and the Williams are a little less expensive, but they're US made. They look really nice. And some of these tools aren't super cheap. I've tried to find tools that were reasonably priced, but these duckbill pliers, I use them for all kinds of things. Like if you're working on a typewriter and your type is crooked, you could actually use these to grab the type bar and tweak it right or left to form it right or left to straighten out the type bar. Any kind of linkage or anything that you need to form or shape inside the inside the typewriter to lengthen or stretch a link of some kind. These are super handy. They're handy for putting, nuts on. If you've got a nut you got to put on and it's deep down in there, they're really handy for that. These are, I have had these in my hand all the time when I was working on typewriters. These are just so handy. And to this day now, just about every tool bag or tool box that I have has a pair of duckbill pliers in it, as I use them for all kinds of things. They're the most handy pliers that I own, and I just love having them. Like I say, I've got a couple of links I'm going to put in the description down below. I bet I have a half dozen of these different makes, but about a half dozen in different places around the house because I just use them so much. Some regular needle nose pliers might be handy. I don't actually have any out here with me. Just plain needle nose could be something of a substitute for the duckbill pliers, but the duckbills, I never even have purchased a set of needle nose pliers since then. Now, the other thing you're going to need are some diagonal cutters. They don't necessarily need to be flush cut, these are, but the thing you're going to be cutting, the flush cut's nice. The thing you're going to be cutting is not wire so much, but you're going to be shortening springs. You got a spring that's not strong enough. Maybe you're going to cut a couple of 3 coils off of it and then reform the end of it, and you need to be able to cut it. Now here's the thing, these are some snap-ons that I bought when I first got started. And actually, these aren't the first pair. The first pair got so chewed up I had to get another pair. Snap-ons are really expensive, and to be honest, since I got this pair, I wasn't working on typewriters as much, and so I haven't chewed them up. But the spring steel in a coil spring that you might cut with these is really hard, and it tends to just chew up the edges so that they get in pretty bad shape after a while. So I'm going to put a link for some side cutters or diagonal cutters. They're flush cut in the description down below. They're Arrow brand, which is a popular brand. They look like they're decently made, but they're not expensive. They're like $7 or $8. And don't expect that if you're cutting springs, don't expect that your cutters are going to last real long, because you are going to just chew the edges up as you cut springs. These are generally made for cutting soft electrical wire and stuff like that. And when you start cutting hardened spring steel, it just tears up the edges. So don't be dismayed if they get kind of chewed up. They're not expensive. Just, go get another pair. Okay. The next thing are spring hooks. Spring hooks are the mainstay of typewriter repair, and there's so much you can do with them. The most common and the one you're going to use probably the most frequently is an IBM style spring hook. Now, we used to buy these from not only Ames Supply in Dallas. We used to go downtown. IBM had an office, and we could go there and buy tools direct from IBM. And these are one of the things we used to get a bunch of these. Now, there's a number of companies that make these. If you look on Amazon, you'll find one made by John Ard, and they want like $20 a piece for them. But I found a place called Crawford Tool that they have some spring hooks, and these are like $5. And I'm going to put a link in the description. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that. That's fine. I want, people to get these at a decent price. But it's got a hook on one end so you can hook it on a spring and pull it. It's got this end where you can hook this over a spring and push it. And hooking springs on and taking them off, an IBM style spring hook is a really essential tool. Okay, another really important tool is a captive spring hook. Now, a captive spring hook has a tiny little hook on the end of it that when you push the button on the back, the hook comes out. You can see that. And allows you to catch little tiny springs, which there are a number of in a typewriter, and then you can hook the spring on and turn it loose. And these have a plunger. Now, this is an old one that I've had since, it came probably from either IBM or Ames Supply, and I've had since, the early 80s. These I can't find anymore, but again, Crawford Tool has a similar unit. It's got this blue plastic cap on the end of it, which is a little kind of not straight, but it seems to work. But again, when you push the button on there, the blue cap on the end, it extends this out, and again, allows you to hook a small spring. These, again, if you look on Amazon, these are like $60, but at Crawford Tool, I think these were like $6.75. And I'm going to put links in there. So Crawford Tool, I ordered one of these and one of the IBM spring hooks from Crawford just to make sure the quality was okay, since I didn't know anything about that company. And so I ordered these two items from Crawford Tool. And they came in this little bag. They came to me really quickly, and they seem to be like a good company to work with. Certainly, they've got a lot of other specialty tools, so you'll probably want to, peruse their website. And if you find anything else that's helpful, you should get it. I like the captive spring hook so much that back when I was repairing typewriters, I made this one. So this is hexagonal brass stock that you could get at the hobby store, and I just got it in 3 sizes that one size would fit into another, and I cut 2 pieces here and soldered them together to make this longer tube, and then cut a shorter piece for this handle. This hook that goes through here is spring steel music wire that I shaped, and I had to heat it and shape it and then reheat treat it, and I cut the tip of this so it's got a notch like the regular spring hook that goes into, you can see. And then put a spring in there that I found and soldered the tip of this to the tip of the spring to this brass piece. And I made myself a bigger captive spring hook, which you can't buy these. This is just something I made. And it has been handy for springs that are a little bit larger in size that I need to hook on. And so that's a really fun one to have. I wish somebody made a slightly bigger one, but unfortunately they don't. Now, there are some specialty tools that unfortunately you can't, I should have dug these out ahead of time, that you can't just buy anywhere. One of them is a segment pick. Now, looking at the shape of this, it's a pretty unique shape, but the purpose of a segment pick is to go into these grooves where the type bars are and to clean out the dust and lint that gets in these grooves. So you get a typewriter that's really, and this is a tool that, if you're going to take a typewriter and chemically clean it or hose it down with solvent and blow it out with compressed air and all that stuff, you wouldn't need this, but this is something you would use in the field when you're trying to service a customer's typewriter and their type basket is all gunked up with lint from the, these ribbons are cotton, and so they shed a certain amount of fiber and just plus dust and eraser crud and, from typewriter erasers. And so sometimes digging these out with this segment tool was really handy. So, just looking at this, you could probably make something like this. It's not very thick sheet metal. You can it's got to fit in the grooves of your typewriter type basket, so you can kind of get an idea there. But you could make it, this one's steel, but you could make it out of brass, which would be pretty easy to form. And then this is just a piece of tubing, obviously, that's been, looks like just smashed on the end of that and maybe spot welded or something, but you could solder it on or just glue it on. Or you could just make the whole thing one piece. But probably it wouldn't be too hard to make something like this, but super handy when you're trying to clean the gunk out of a type basket. And that's all it's for, is just cleaning those grooves in a type basket. That's called a segment pick. Okay, the other thing is a keyboard brush. This is another item we used to get from Ames Supply in Dallas, and Ames is no longer in business. What's interesting is it wasn't that many years ago, I had a daughter-in-law gave me an old Remington typewriter as a gift, and the Platen in it, the roller, was super hard and chewed up. And I looked up Ames Supply, and this is in like 2002 or something like that, and they were still recovering Platens. They would actually grind the rubber down and coat it with new rubber and grind it to the right dimensions, and it wasn't too expensive. And so I actually had the Platen redone on that one. There are some companies now that recover Platens. I think there's a couple people that were starting up doing it last I looked. But this is a keyboard brush, and the purpose of this, of course, is just to clean keyboards. You can get down in between the keys and clean them out and get all the dust and the gunk out of them. And again, this is more of a service tool rather than a, if you're actually fully chemically cleaning the typewriter, you wouldn't need to do that. But this is super handy. I've got a couple of these, and I use them for all kinds of things, from a bench brush to anytime I need to brush out in between something, this works pretty good. So I looked on Amazon to see if they had anything like this. They don't have that. They do have some keyboard brushes. So they sell this as a keyboard brush, and I'm going to put a link in the description for it. It works pretty well. It's not quite as narrow, and it's shaped differently, but it certainly gets down into the keys and allows you to to get the dust and the dirt out of them. So this will certainly work for you as a keyboard brush, and I'm going to put a link in the description for it. It was really inexpensive, and it works for your computer keyboard, and that's what I think it was really aimed at, was computer keyboards, but it works for that as well too. I also found this at a thrift store. It's a bench brush, I think, for like a drafts person to clean off their bench, but it's kind of narrow enough that it'll kind of work too. So really, any kind of brush that you can get in between the keys and clean it out. You can buy these at automotive stores. It's like an automotive parts cleaner brush, I think, or something like that. You can even use something like that. And these are handy for like cleaning out type baskets and cleaning other parts of the typewriter. Just a brush like that is really handy. Well, let's see. There's another thing that is really helpful are Allen wrenches. Now, these are actually IBM socket keys. You can see the old IBM had this little case for a long time. And these are, IBM used what's called spline wrenches. These are actually like a Torx almost. There's really no way to make you see that. But it's like a Torx. It's like a splined wrench instead of a hexagonal wrench, like an Allen key. But you're going to want to get some Allen wrenches, some small ones. You can, you can get those in a number of places. I'll see if I can find a link for those two. But some Allen wrenches, again, you want US if you're working on like US made typewriters, and you would want metric if you're working on European typewriters. And there's some other specialty tools that you probably have to just kind of think your way through figuring out a way to replicate. This was a type bar bender. So the type bars, if you have a type bar that's like leaning too far forward or backward, you could actually grab it in this, and you could actually straighten the type bar. Let's see if I can get a side key here that's easier to see. But you would actually grab it in this, and you could actually bend the type bar forward or backwards with this tool. This is an IBM tool. This comes from the days when IBM made type bar typewriters, and it's pretty handy if really more of a tool you'd use in the shop when you're really trying to fine-tune a typewriter and get all the type really even, and where their impressions are really, really even, then you would use that. This is another tool that IBM made for that purpose, and it's a kind of like a pinching plier that it doesn't meet all the way. There's a gap there, but if you've got a typeface that you need to make lean forward, you could grab it in this and pinch the back edge of the type bar, and it would kind of lean it forward, or you could pinch the front side of it and kind of lean it backwards a little bit, tilt it backwards. Not something I use very often, but one of those weird typewriter tools that I still have. This is a similar kind of forming tool where you can pinch like a type bar or something in between here, and it'll stretch one side of it by squeezing it. Just odd, weird tools that, like I say, most of the time you're not going to have much use for. Now, this is a tool that, to be honest, I'm not sure where I got this. I think an old typewriter repair guy at another shop gave this to me. But this is a forming tool, and it's used for, like, there's all kinds of linkages in a typewriter, and sometimes you need to shape one a little bit, or maybe shorten it by putting a kink in it. So if there's like a metal rod or something that you need to shape, see if I can find something in here, you could actually grab it with this, and you could bend it. And so this is a forming tool. This is something you would use to bend or form pieces of linkage and stuff. I think this is a Royal typewriter tool, but I'm not sure. It has no markings on it other than this S39. And it might actually be a forming tool for some of the forming tools and stuff I've found over the years come from the telephone company for forming contacts and old telephone systems. Anyway, let's talk about lubrication. So I had this oiler. I'm going to look and see if I can find anything that's similar to this. This is from Ames Supply. It's got a little brass nozzle here that you can loosen, and then a reservoir here that you can put your oil in, and then you could dispense it. Really handy if you want to oil a type basket. You could just run a bead of oil, around your type bars and other places in the typewriter where you had to reach way up in the typewriter to oil something. Super handy. The oil I use, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of a red color. Of course, this bottle is stained from it, I think. But the oil I always used was a lightweight machine oil. Now, we used to buy oil from IBM, but IBM's not selling it anymore. You can go to Walmart and buy this Dritz sewing machine oil, and it's a good quality lightweight machine oil. It's very inexpensive at Walmart. And what I do is I mix it 50-50 with an automotive oil you can get at the auto parts store called Marvel Mystery Oil. And the Marvel Mystery Oil is this deep red. And I mix it half and half. And these oilers, the sewing machine oilers, do have a long spout. So you could kind of use that, maybe not too handy if you're going out in the field, which I don't know if anyone makes service calls anymore. But with this long spout, you can dispense oil at a distance, kind of. So, but I mix the lightweight machine oil 50-50 with Marvel Mystery Oil. And this is something I learned from the typewriter shop I went to work at. That's what they were doing, and I've just continued it. The reason for doing that is the Marvel Mystery Oil is a high detergent additive oil for car engines, and it's made to help clean gunk and stuff out of car engines. And so what it does when you're using this on a typewriter is that if you've got old dried up oil or other things that are making, something sticky or not work well, that little bit of Marvel Mystery Oil that's, it's half and half, but that Marvel Mystery Oil will help break down some of the old lubricant and stuff and flush it out so that you're, when you're working in the field and you don't have the luxury of chemically cleaning the typewriter, this really works well. And so I've just continued to use this. I use this on typewriters. I use it on a lot of other different things. Anything that needs a lightweight machine oil, I use a 50-50 mix of sewing machine oil. It's easy to get these days, and the Marvel Mystery Oil. It works really well and seems to work for a long time. Okay, there's one abrasive thing you're going to need. From time to time, you're going to find it necessary to clean a typewriter platen. And get a piece of this here. They make an abrasive cloth, and it's made for sanding drywall. You can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and look for drywall sanding sheets, and you want the fine grit, which is still pretty coarse. I think if you can read the numbers, it says 180 on here. But the sanding sheets, for sanding drywall, work really good for cleaning typewriter platens. Now, the way we used to do that is you would actually take the platen out, and I would put a folded up rag underneath this, and I would squirt the chemical we used to use back then was 1,1,1-trichloroethane, which is a chlorinated solvent, which is, there's probably a hole in the ozone layer above my workbench where I used to work, but you can't get that stuff anymore, and you wouldn't want to. But what does work really well seems to be just alcohol or maybe even lighter fluid, but you can kind of wrap this around the platen and go back and forth and scrub the platen with this lightly. You don't want to do much more than just take the glaze off the surface. Now, it's not going to soften a platen, but what it'll do is it'll take the glaze off the surface and enable it to grab paper well enough to roll paper up. But this is what we used to use when I was in the field. If I needed to clean a platen, take the platen out, lay it in this, and then just scrub back and forth. I actually have a typewriter platen laying here. I have an old Smith Corona typewriter I'm working on. So if I wanted to do that again, I would put this in a rag and I would go back and forth, and it will scrub the surface of it and get any glaze off of it. Like I say, it won't soften the rubber, but it will certainly put a nice enough finish on it that it'll grab paper again. So I think these are 3M drywall sanding sheets that you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's. Get the fine grit, which is 180, and that'll work for cleaning platens. Okay, I think that covers most of the tools that I used to use. Well, I hope some of that information was helpful for you. I really enjoyed working on typewriters back then. You know, working on mechanical things, machines with hand tools, that's just something I really love doing. And one of the jobs that I had that I really enjoyed, the part I didn't enjoy about it was making service calls in the summer in a three-piece suit in an unair-conditioned car. Yeah, that part wasn't too fun. But the actual working on typewriters, really enjoyed. Hey, make sure you check out the links in the description down below. There's links for several of the tools that we looked at on the workbench, like I mentioned, and you know, you want to make sure you find some of those specialty tools there. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And as always, thanks for watching.